you in this commencement of the 2023 class. Now, graduates, I'm going to talk to you mostly. This is a time of lasts for you as the class of 2023. This may be, if you're an undergraduate student, this may be the last time at this university as an undergraduate student. You may have competed in your last university athletic contest or given your last choral or instrumental performance at this university. You've received your last paper, hopefully, stained by the bleeding red ink of your professor. And in a few moments, you will make your last walk across this stage as a student. So, this is a time of lasts for you. But I would remind you not to stay in that mode of thinking for too long. As Winston Churchill reminded the British people in his speech when he was at the Mansion House in London in November of 1942, talking about the recent British victory over the Germans at the Second Battle of Al Alamein. He said, "Now this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning." You see, graduation is only an end insofar as it is a beginning. It is certainly a milestone to be commemorated, but it cannot be a monument built. There is much too much to do for that to be the case. This is only the first for you of many graduations. Some of those may be academic, but most of them won't be. They will be life milestones. And by God's grace, there will be many. But with all of those forthcoming graduations, so to speak, there is one graduation that you can never make. Do not graduate from Jesus. What I want to remind you of in our time together today is that every graduation, you will face certain moments. I've found these moments to be present with every single graduation I have experienced in my life. I'm not just talking about multiple academic graduations, I'm talking about life milestone graduations. And I'm not alone. People for thousands of years have experienced these very same things as well. In fact, I'd like to take us for a moment back about 2,000 years to a few fishermen who were in the Middle East, who spent virtually their entire lives up to this point living around a glorified lake in what we would call the country. We get the country out here in Houghton, don't we? But first, a little background. For the Jewish child, school and education were extraordinarily important. Right there in the synagogue, they were educated in the law of Moses. And by the early teenage years, some of the best and the brightest of them would go on to interview with a rabbi in the hopes that they might be able to study and learn from him. For the rest of them, they would graduate to probably going back to work in the family business, since they didn't make the honor roll. And that's exactly what a man named Simon, who we call Peter, did. Along with his brother Andrew and some other partners of theirs, another brother pair named James and John, Peter just spent his days fishing. It's what he did for a living. It came naturally. It was a part of their family business. But one day a rabbi came through their town named Jesus, and he changed everything. And through this encounter, what we can learn from in this encounter is what happens, what moments there are in every graduation that we will experience in our lives. Firstly, with every graduation, there is anticipation. Let me take you to the book of Luke, chapter 5, and let's look in on how Luke records this interaction with Peter and Jesus. Scripture says in Luke chapter 5, beginning in verse 1, one day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, which is the Sea of Galilee, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and he taught the people from the boat. When Jesus had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." Now, as we understand the context here, we begin to see it. Peter had been asked to follow Jesus. This was extraordinary because only the best and the brightest could request an interview to follow a rabbi, but here it has been reversed. The rabbi actually asked the fisherman who didn't make the honor roll to follow him. I imagine that Peter had a high degree of anticipation about what was to come, and you can be sure that he wouldn't be able to see how it would play out. I mean, how often does a fisherman get fishing instructions from a carpenter? Not often. And in fact, Jesus says to him, "Put out into the deep water in the middle of the day," precisely what you didn't do as a fisherman in the Sea of Galilee. Now, as you sit here today, graduates, and you contemplate the coming days after your graduation, I'm sure that you're filled with anticipation. This is a time where we dream of all we want to be and all we want to do. And we think about the world of possibilities that is standing right in front of us. But let me remind you of something. You will never graduate from Jesus. With every milestone or every graduation, there's going to be a new anticipation of what's to come and what's next. But with Jesus, you won't always be able to predict what that's going to look like. You need to get comfortable with the fact that you're not always going to be able to predict what life with Jesus is going to be like. Now, anticipation comes with every milestone and every graduation, but so does temptation. Let me explain as we look back into the same text beginning in verse 6. When Peter and his friends had let down the nets, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. And when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish that they had just taken. Now you may be thinking to yourself, what temptation is it that you see in this particular story? Well, let me explain why I feel that here with Peter, he experienced some temptation. I have to confess to you that I am a bit leery of ascribing great piety to Peter for his particular confession, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." Why was he saying this? Because he just saw a miraculous catch of fish? So the miracle is what brought him to his knees? I actually tend to doubt that that was the motivation because of what happened just before it. See, chapter 4 tells us that there was a demon-possessed man at the synagogue in Capernaum, and Jesus sent the demon out. Then Jesus went to Peter's house and healed Peter's mother-in-law. Then people started showing up at the house with sicknesses and demon possession, and Jesus started healing them and casting demons out. You tell me, which one is more miraculous? A big catch of fish or Jesus tossing demons around like they're Muppets? So forgive me if I'm a little skeptical about Peter's confession based upon a big catch of fish. I think Peter responded this way because it became a point of conflict internally for him. Imagine Peter's reputation with this catch of fish. He was a fisherman by trade, and now he was going to have the largest fish catch ever. It was going to be a Sea of Galilee record. His name would be listed as the club champion at the Galilee Yacht Club. He could upgrade and now buy a bigger and better boat. He could take his family on vacation to the Dead Sea Disney theme park. You see, Peter did not see this coming. And when it did, he was faced with a choice: to follow Jesus with all he is, or just enjoy something Jesus gave you and move on from him. The same thing can happen for you as well, my friends. You have plans. You have dreams. And if you follow Jesus, sometimes he may give those to you. Or he may change everything. The crisis comes when we have an expectation of Jesus that he doesn't meet. Then we get disappointed, or worse yet, he gives us our dreams and we keep asking him to hold our bags while we walk the red carpet. With every graduation, friends, there is always going to be the temptation to make the journey about you now. But I want to strongly remind you today that choosing your own way will never turn out like you want it to. Do not graduate from Jesus. With every graduation, there's anticipation and there is temptation, but I'd lastly tell you this: there's also a reorientation. Listen to how verse 10 and 11 finishes. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on shore. They left everything and they followed him. You see, what Jesus does is he reassures Peter not to be afraid of leaving comfort and leaving predictability, and Peter does it. He does it. He leaves his way of life and he heads out on this great adventure with Jesus. You see, where Peter might have thought that his graduation to working in the family business was an end, it was actually only a beginning. And now, Peter got to experience new beginnings all the time, and a storm begins to rage. And Peter, as an experienced fisherman, actually doesn't know what to do. And Jesus comes walking on the water, and Peter gets out of the boat and joins him walking on the water. Just take a picture of that in your mind for a minute. See, this, Jesus shows Peter, this is how it will be. You will never graduate from faith, and so you can never graduate from Jesus. Most people might live by faith for just a moment or two, but rarely want to continue because it gets scary. My wife is here with me, and she doesn't know that I'm about to tell a story. Isn't that great? Every husband in here is going, "Don't do it, man."
Presenting the graduates of Houghton Online, Destiny Coombs. Rachel Dozma. Professor Anne Monroe Ballardi.
Before we conclude our time here today, I want to give our graduates the opportunity to express their thanks to a very special group, their families and loved ones. At this time, I invite the families and loved ones of our graduates to stand. Thank you. Clearly, without you, your support, your encouragement, your nurturing, our graduates would not be here today. And so we're incredibly thankful for you, and we thank God for the role that you have played in their lives.